Hey y'all, welcome back to Proficiency in Play. This is Pip, your Dungeon Master. Today we've got a good one where I talk about the Pantheon, that I made a completely unique Pantheon to the world of Eos, how the gods relate to one another, what they govern, and the story of the origin of Eos and where the gods stand now. As we continue further into this game, the gods will become more and more important. But at the end of the episode, you just listened to, Mortimer talks a bit about the races that were made by the gods and represent the structure of the things that the gods value. And so I wanted to go and give you a little bit of background on the Pantheon itself. So as we encounter these different races and learn more about it, we can kind of see how it all fits together. So with that being said, here is a family tree. It looks a little complicated, but it's relatively simple. Up here in the middle, you have Eos. And he has two brothers, Kyrios and Egos. And these three brothers are gods that come upon the oceans and build the land of Eos out of the waters. Now, Eos, where the land of Eos gets its name, is your typical creator god, while Kyrios and Egos are the necessary for creation. So none of the three can create life fully without the other's help. If you follow this arrow down here, you see that Eos ends up creating 4 offspring effectively with his brother's help. And these 4 offspring are Avali, Neris, Turan, and Aquara. And later on, I'll give you the whole story. But for now, just realize we have 6 major races in the world of Eos. And each of them are tied to one of these 6 gods: Egos, Avali, Neris, Turan, Aquara, or Kyrios. So with Egos, we have the Savra, who we've already met a little bit. With Avali, we have the Avi. Neris gave us the Narrator. Turan, the Taranach. Aquara and the Aquarion, who we will meet very shortly. And Kyrios is the progenitor of the Grimmel, who, of course, populate Revel, and we know a lot about. There is no specific race descended directly from Eos, as his sort of DNA was broken up into these 4 offspring that he made, and they represent different ideals. And Eos, this sort of paradise, is almost like the balance of these 4 ideals when they work together in harmony. So let's just talk about a little about what each of these 7 gods represent, and then we'll get into the storyline and how they interconnect with one another. So first off, we have Eos. Eos is your typical creator god who's good-natured, he cares for the people, he beget the land and the life of the land, and he rules the heavens as king. He created the land of Eos itself, and he has the power to create matter. Eos is the creator in the sense that all of matter stems from him here in the world of Eos. His brothers do not create matter at all. So anything material must have been created by Eos. And he represents a few different things. He represents the natural order of things. He represents the dawn and newness and life. He also is the father of Avali, Neris, Turan, and Aquara, as we learned about in the last slide. And we'll see how that plays in a little bit more in just a second. Now, Kyrios, Eos, and Egos are 3 brothers who are responsible for the creation of the land of Eos and the life that populates it. Kyrios, I titled him the Drive, and while he doesn't create matter, he has power over time, and he has power over things like growth and progress and the natural processes that cause creation to develop and grow. So while Eos can make the matter itself, it was Kyrios who gave the trees the ability to grow. It was Kyrios who gave the peoples the ability to grow and to procreate and to progress. And so he governs over time, and he has the power to speed up or slow down or alter the flow of time. He also is responsible for creating the natural processes that cause the land and the creatures to progress, as I just explained. He is a brother to Eos and Egos. And as far as his personality, he's very, very curious and is always looking for new things to try, for new things to experience. And for him, almost new just means better. He's got this kind of mad scientist vibe where he's just doing things that seem arbitrary, mostly just to see what comes out of it. And he's so curious that way, though, because he represents progress at all costs, he often cares little for the emotional state or sort of the damage that he's causing along the way. If he tries an experiment and gets bored of it, then the creatures he created or the things he created just kind of get left. He doesn't clean up after himself, and that can cause a lot of trouble. He had the Grimmel fashioned after him, and we know already that the Grimmel really respect progress. They procreate quickly, they live relatively short lives, and they're all about progress, and that's why they live in this metropolis of Revel. They have progress drilled into them from creation because of their progenitor, Kyrios. The third of the three brothers is Egos, and I called him the definition. While Eos creates the matter, and Kyrios gives the matter the ability to grow and adapt and progress, Egos is what gives the land and the creatures definition. So he's very philosophically minded, and he governs sort of the abstract natures of the mind and the other kind of philosophical ideals that are necessary for life to exist and life to flourish. As I said, he gave definition to the land and identity to the creatures of Eos, causing people to have a sense of self, causing the right distinctions between the mountains and the valleys and the oceans. He kind of defined everything that exists, and in giving it definition, gave it purpose. As far as his personality, he's very wise and introspective. He's the kind of philosophically minded idea of a character. As I said, he's the brother to Eos and Kyrios, and he's very, very self-centered. And because he's so philosophically driven and so interested in understanding and identifying and defining the things around him, he cares very little for the day-to-day challenges of actually governing. And if you remember, Kyrios is so curious and so curious and forward-focused that he also cares very little with the monotony of day-to-day governing creation. He's more interested in seeing what happens when he continues to create. So Eos is kind of left as this king of the heavens governing god. Back to Egos, though, he fashioned the Savra. These are the reptilian lizard folk that we've met already, and they are very self-reliant and industrious. And we'll learn a little more about the Savra as our story continues. So that wraps up the three brothers who are the original deities of the land of Eos and are responsible, the three of them together, in creating the land of Eos that we know. The three brothers, as they bored of their creation, ended up giving life to offspring. Specifically, Eos gave the offspring life, almost cordoned off parts of his own self and gave them life, but his brothers were on board with this, and his brothers helped to fashion the ideals of these four offspring. Now, I made these four offspring because if you've seen my previous videos, the idea of the four primal elements I thought is really, really cool and something interesting. So each of these four are sort of governing one of the four primal elements of air, fire, earth, and water. And they're kind of a four different sides of the character of Eos that were given life by Eos himself. So the first one we have is Avali. I titled him The Thrill, and he governs the air. He is the son of Eos, as I said, and the brother to the three we'll talk about in just a second, Neris, Toran, and Aquara. All four of these offspring really represent particular ideals, and for Avali, that's things like freedom, exhilaration, thrill, fun, passion, excitement, exuberance, just the experiential pleasure that exists in living life. And he fashioned the Avi, which are birds, effectively, who live in the northern mountains and rule the skies. And we'll kind of get into meeting them in a little bit. We haven't really met them yet, but they are a really cool race. It's all about fun and thrill. And Avali really settled the northern quadrant of Eos, which is these white-capped mountains and foothills. Just like the four children are four representations of four sides of Eos's character, they also divide the land of Eos among their four populations. A big reason to create these four offspring was for more creation to happen. And each of these four offspring had Eos fashion a race that represented what they cared about. Because Kurios and Egos are so self-centered and off doing their own thing, Eos grew lonely. And that was a big motivation for creating these children, so someone could govern with him, so someone could understand his burden. And so the first of these is Avali, who governs air. Next up, we have Neris. I called her the Force, daughter to Eos and sister to the other three. She represents and governs the primal element of fire, representing power, physicality, aggression, destruction, violence, valor, glory, courage, all of these things. She settled in the Darklands, in the south part of Eos. This is a volcanic region, and it has Neris' fingerprints on it. And she fashioned the Narrator. The best instance of a Narrator we have in our story right now is right at the very beginning. This large manticore-like creature with a scorpion's tail and dark scarlet wings. That is what a Narrator is. And we'll see them more and more as our story goes. Third up, we have Toran, who I called the Foundation. Again, the son of Eos and brother to the other three. And he governs the element of earth. He represents bounty, tradition, sturdiness, protection, conservation, growth. All of these things that you really associate with the forest. He's kind of got a Mother Nature kind of idea to him. And he separated, when the four quadrants were separated, he took the eastern part of Eos, which is an immense forest where the Taranok now live, who are stewards of the land and are very traditional, natural creatures. We've seen the Taranok already in our story as well. These are the centaur-like creatures that Mercy interacted with early in our game. Last but not least, we have Aquara, who I entitled the Soulless. She is the goddess of the element of water. Again, Eos's daughter and sister to the other three. And she represents things like peace, restoration, health, comfort, unity, rest. All of these things that are just nice, they're warm, they're comfortable, they're unifying. And she loved the waters around Eos and carved out a bay where Revel is situated on this bay. This bay was carved out of Eos, and that represents her domain. And she fashioned the Aquarion, which we will meet very, very soon in our game, as our party is currently heading down to the realm of the Aquarion to get the Water of Restoration to save Warren. Now that we know kind of who our 7 characters are, let me give you a brief origin story of the land of Eos. Eos, Egos, and Kyrios are three brothers, and as they explore over the waters, they decide that they want to create and become gods of a new land. After they do their creation, they bring this island up and they populate it with creatures, and they give the land systems to continue to develop. Kyrios goes off and continues to experiment with some of the creatures of the land and the land itself. Egos goes off and defines everything, names everything, and continues to be consumed by this idea for the abstract. And Eos is left to govern the world that they've created. Eos takes it very seriously that if they're going to create life and create a world, that they should care for that life and stay involved to maintain balance and order to the life and world that they've created. Because of Eos's loneliness, he creates 4 offspring with the help of his brothers to govern and populate the world. Eos wanted to add more what we would consider sentient races to the world, because right now the life that existed in the land of Eos was mostly the leftovers of Kyrios's crazy experiments, and they could really just be described as beasts or monsters. Eos wanted to add people groups, add civilization, add tribes, but because his brothers weren't really helping him govern, and out of loneliness, he created these 4 offspring to subdivide the land of Eos to make it easier to govern. So he made these 4 offspring, and then the offspring each, with their father's help, made these races that we talked about and began to subdivide the land of Eos and watch their 4 races flourish. Well, when Egos and Kyrios became aware of these 4 races and civilization had gone on long enough for them to realize that, wait a second, there are people on this land now, and they're worshiping Turan and Nereus and Avali and Aquara like gods. And above them, they're worshiping Eos as the sole creator and sustainer of life on the land. And the 2 of them get really jealous because they created the land of Eos as well. In fact, the peoples begin to call the land Eos after Eos, and his brothers became very, very jealous. Their idea is, well, we'll go to our brother Eos and have him make us races that represent what we care about as well, and then we'll have a say in what goes on in the land, and we'll kind of have toys to play with because they are very selfish people. And so Eos did and created with his brothers the Grimmel for Kyrios and the Savra for Egos. Though because the Grimmel and Savra were created after the likeness in personality of their progenitor gods respectively, neither of those races became religious. Because Kyrios is so forward-looking and is always looking for something new, his children, the Grimmel, didn't care much for where they came from, only where they were going. So they didn't worship Kyrios. And Egos is so self-centered and self-reliant and about defining things in his own way that his children, the Savra, were very self-reliant as well and cared little for the gods that seemed to control everything. The Savra were just going to control as much as they could control and focus on their own domains and their own life. So the 4 races that Eos's children made continued to worship them and worship Eos. But Egos and Kyrios just get left out. And even after fashioning races for them, those races don't worship them. And so their jealousy just continues to build, and it comes to a head, and they end up killing their brother Eos to seize control of creation because they decide that the 2 of them are going to run the land of Eos instead of their brother. So they kill their brother Eos, which leads us to a schism in the heavens. Eos was the king, the good king. And now that he's gone, we kind of have a 4 on one side and 2 on the other, where Eos's 4 children try to maintain balance among the world as they have, and his two brothers are trying to seize control. Now, Eos's two brothers, Aegos and Kyrios, are stronger individually than any of his children are. Though, because there's 4 against 2, there's this tough balance where neither side can really influence too much. So with the heavens so focused on maintaining balance with each other, the people of the land of Eos have seemingly been forgotten by their gods and are left to live life as best they can. And this is where we find ourselves at the start of our story. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this was helpful to you to really understand the background and what's going on behind the surface of the land of Eos. As I said, as we meet these other races, you'll be able to see some of this come to a head more, and the gods themselves will become pretty important to the story moving forward. If you appreciated this video and found it entertaining or educational, hopefully both, please drop a like on this video and consider subscribing to the channel so I can continue to make more of videos like this to really help the world of Eos come alive for you. With that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.